A dense fog clung to the ruined streets of Black Hollow, a town long forgotten by the world. Cracked buildings stood like silent tombstones, their shattered windows revealing only darkness within. No birds sang. No wind howled. The air itself felt dead. A group of 5 explorers stepped cautiously into the abandoned town, their flashlights cutting through the eerie stillness. Ethan, the leader, had spent months researching Black Hollow. It had vanished from maps decades ago, erased from history. Samantha, a journalist, was eager to uncover its dark secrets. Cole, a skeptic and former police officer, believed they were chasing myths. Mia, a tech expert, carried cameras to document their findings. Daniel, the quietest among them, seemed unnerved from the start. Their arrival was met with unsettling silence. The streets were cracked, vines creeping through broken asphalt. A rusted sign barely clung to its post, "Welcome to Black Hollow." Population, 3,421. Cole snorted. "Looks like 0 to me." Samantha clicked on her recorder. Black Hollow, once a thriving mining town, was abandoned overnight. No official records explain why. Some say an epidemic, others claim something beneath the town forced them out. "We're here to find the truth." Their footsteps echoed too loudly as they moved toward the town square. A church stood at the center, its doors slightly ajar. Across from it, the sheriff's office and a crumbling hotel loomed like silent witnesses. Daniel stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" The others paused. The silence was deafening, until a faint scraping noise echoed from somewhere beneath them. Mia checked her gear. Maybe a loose pipe? Ethan knelt, brushing away dirt. The old cobblestone streets had cracks running through them, revealing glimpses of something beneath, an underground tunnel system. "Whatever happened here," he murmured, "it didn't just happen on the surface." An unsettling discovery. They pressed forward. At the edge of town stood a dilapidated mine entrance, its wooden beams barely holding. A keep-out sign hung crookedly, words faded with age. "This was the heart of the town," Ethan said. But no records explain why it shut down. As they stepped inside, the air turned heavy with decay. The walls were lined with rusted mining equipment, and strange symbols were carved into the rock. Mia took photos. "These symbols, they're not normal. They look ancient." Daniel's voice trembled. "Maybe we shouldn't be here." Then came the whisper. A low, inhuman whisper that sent shivers down their spines. "Leave." The group froze. Cole drew his flashlight, scanning the shadows. "No one's here," he muttered. But something was watching them. Then, a sudden crash. A section of the mine's floor collapsed, revealing a cavern below. Dust filled the air, and as it cleared, they saw them. Corpses. Dozens of them. Piled haphazardly in the darkness below. Their faces twisted in agony. Their bodies unnaturally preserved. Ethan swallowed hard. What the hell happened here? Then, one of the corpses twitched. Samantha gasped. Did that just move?" Before anyone could react, a hand shot up from the pile. A shriveled, pale figure pulled itself upright, its sunken eyes locking onto them. Its jaw stretched unnaturally wide. And then, it screamed. A horrific, gurgling shriek that shook the cavern. The silence was broken. From the pile of bodies, more figures began to stir. Bones cracked, flesh twitched, and soon, the dead were rising. Daniel stumbled back, his face pale. No way." Ethan grabbed his arm. "We need to move. Now." The explorers turned and ran. Behind them, the creatures clawed their way free, their movements jerky and unnatural. The mine began to shake, dust raining from above. Something else was waking up. As they neared the entrance, the ground beneath them rumbled. A massive stone door, hidden beneath the earth for decades, slid open. What lay beyond was pitch black. But from within the darkness, something watched them. And it wasn't human. The group burst out of the mine entrance, gasping for breath. The screams of the undead still echoed behind them, sending chills down their spines. Dust and sweat clung to their skin, but they had no time to rest. Ethan spun around, gripping his flashlight. The mine's entrance stood still, dark and silent. No creatures followed. Cole bent over, hands on his knees. What the hell was that? Mia shook her head, her face pale. That wasn't normal. That wasn't a hallucination. Samantha cut in. No. We all saw it. Daniel's hands trembled. We need to leave. Right now. But Ethan wasn't ready to run. Not yet. We came here to uncover the truth, he said, his voice steady. That thing in there? It's part of it. And there's more. Did you see that stone door? Mia nodded. It wasn't just a cave. That was a structure. Something ancient. Cole frowned. Are you seriously suggesting that this town was built over something else? Ethan turned back to the mine. His gut told him they were on the edge of something bigger. Something buried. And it was waiting to be found. The tunnels below. Instead of retreating, the group searched the town for another way in. The mine was too unstable, but the underground tunnels Ethan had noticed earlier could be a way forward. They found an old maintenance hatch behind the sheriff's office, hidden beneath thick overgrowth. Ethan yanked it open, revealing a rusted metal ladder leading down. Samantha's heart pounded. We're really doing this? Ethan nodded. No turning back now. One by one, they climbed down. Buried horrors. The air grew colder as they descended into darkness. Their flashlights flickered over damp, crumbling walls. The tunnel stretched forward, curving deeper underground. Faded writings covered the walls. Some were old warnings scratched into the stone. Others were symbols just like the ones in the mine. Mia snapped a photo. This language isn't any modern dialect. It's ancient. Daniel hesitated. Then why is it here? Samantha ran a hand over one of the messages, her breath hitching as she whispered the words aloud. They are awake. They do not forget. A shiver ran down her spine. Cole turned. Guys, I don't think we're alone. The group fell silent. Somewhere in the tunnel, a faint rustling echoed. A wet, shuffling sound. Daniel's flashlight landed on something in the distance, a figure hunched in the darkness. Its back was turned, its posture unnaturally twisted. It swayed slightly, as if listening. Then, it turned its head too far, twisting until its hollow eyes locked onto them. For a split second, no one moved. Then it charged. Samantha screamed. The group stumbled backward. Cole fired his gun, bang. The shot echoed, but the creature kept coming. Ethan grabbed a rusted pipe from the ground and swung. Crack! The creature's skull split, sending it sprawling. For a moment, silence returned. Daniel's breathing was ragged. Tell me we're leaving now. Ethan stared at the corpse, its blackened veins still twitching beneath rotting flesh. They had uncovered something terrible. But this was just the beginning. The tunnel remained silent, except for the group's ragged breathing. Ethan kept his grip tight on the rusted pipe, his knuckles white. The creature lay motionless, its skull cracked open. But even in death, it looked wrong. Its skin was leathery, pulled tight over sharp bones. Its fingers were unnaturally long, ending in blackened nails. And its mouth, it stretched too wide, as if it had been screaming before death finally claimed it. Samantha lifted her camera with shaking hands and snapped a picture. This isn't normal. No kidding, Cole muttered, reloading his gun. That thing took a bullet to the chest and kept coming. Daniel pressed against the damp tunnel wall, his whole body trembling. We need to leave. Right now. Mia turned her flashlight toward the tunnel ahead, her voice barely above a whisper. What if there are more? A heavy silence settled between them. What if this wasn't the only one? Then, the silence broke. A distant sound echoed through the tunnels. A slow, scraping noise. Then another. And another. Samantha's stomach twisted. More of them were waking up. Trapped underground. Move! Ethan barked, shoving the group forward. They ran, their footsteps echoing through the narrow passage. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if the tunnels themselves were alive, watching. The symbols on the walls became more frequent, some of them looking freshly carved. Cole gritted his teeth. This place is a damn graveyard. Suddenly, the tunnel split into two paths. Left, a dark corridor, stretching further down. Right, a massive iron door, slightly ajar. Ethan hesitated. The right might lead to another exit. Mia's voice was tight. And the left? Cole exhaled. No clue. But if something's chasing us, I'd rather have a door between us and them. Daniel didn't wait, he rushed for the door, shoving it open. Beyond it was a massive chamber. The Chamber of the Forgotten. The group stepped inside, their flashlights revealing a haunting sight. Rows of stone slabs lined the room, each one holding a corpse. Some were wrapped in decayed cloth. Others were nothing more than skeletal remains. It was a tomb. Samantha covered her mouth. This is a burial chamber. Mia scanned the walls, covered in carvings. These symbols. I think they're warnings. Cole exhaled sharply. Great. Because that always means good things. Ethan examined one of the corpses. It looked older than the town itself. Guys, he said slowly, these bodies, they've been here for centuries. Daniel took a step back. Then what was that thing in the tunnel? A new sound filled the air. A low rumble. The ground shook. And then, one of the corpses twitched. The dead don't rest. At first, it was just a slight movement. A shift in the cloth. Then another. Then another. Samantha took a step back. No. No, no, no. One of the bodies sat up. Its empty sockets turned toward them. Then, as if responding to an unseen command, the rest followed. A chorus of cracking bones and shifting flesh filled the air as the dead began to rise. Daniel whimpered, his voice cracking. We have to get out of here. The first corpse lurched forward, mouth gaping. Its jaws unhinged like a snake's, revealing rotting teeth. Ethan swung his pipe, smashing it in the head. The creature staggered, but didn't fall. Cole fired, bang. The bullet punched into its chest, but it kept coming. They don't die like normal zombies. Mia shouted. Then the room erupted into chaos. The undead lunged. The explorers fought to escape. And in the distance, something much, much worse began to wake. The chamber of the dead had come alive. The once motionless corpses dragged themselves upright, their bodies stiff with age but moving with unnatural hunger. Their hollow sockets locked onto the intruders, as if recognizing them. As if they had been waiting. Daniel's voice cracked with terror. We are going to die here. Ethan swung his pipe, smashing into a creature's skull. It staggered but didn't fall. Cole fired his gun again, bang. The bullet ripped through one undead's shoulder, but it kept moving, unfazed. These aren't normal zombies. Mia cried. They're different. Samantha grabbed her camera and snapped a picture. The flash illuminated something horrifying. The corpses weren't decaying like normal. Their flesh was dry, hardened, like mummified remains. Their mouths stretched impossibly wide, their skin splitting as they unhinged their jaws like snakes. Something about them was wrong. Run! Ethan roared. The group bolted toward the exit, dodging grasping hands. One creature lunged at Daniel, fingers digging into his jacket. He screamed, thrashing wildly, until Cole grabbed him and ripped him free. Daniel fell hard, gasping for breath, while Cole kicked the creature backward. The undead didn't chase them mindlessly. They moved with purpose. As if something was controlling them. The chase through the tunnels. The group ran back through the narrow tunnel, their flashlights swinging wildly. Shadows danced along the walls, giving the illusion that the darkness itself was alive. The scraping and inhuman whispers followed them. "They don't stop." Samantha gasped. "We need a way out." Ahead, the tunnel sloped downward, leading into a vast underground cavern. The space opened up like a sunken city, with stone archways, bridges, and ruins hidden beneath the earth. Mia's breath caught. This isn't a tunnel. This is an entire underground civilization. Ethan's heart pounded. Black Hollow wasn't just a town. It had been built over something ancient. Something cursed. But there was no time to investigate. A horrible shriek echoed through the cavern, something bigger than the zombies was coming. "Move!" Ethan yelled. The group sprinted across an old stone bridge, its edges crumbling with age. Then, the ground shook violently. From the depths of the cavern, a massive, rotting figure began to rise. The horror below. Samantha stared in horror as the ground split open. A colossal figure emerged, its body wrapped in tattered robes, its skull-like face hidden beneath a cracked mask. It was not just a zombie. It was something ancient. Something that had been buried for centuries. Ethan froze as the creature's empty eye sockets glowed faintly. Then, it lifted an arm, and the undead lurched forward in unison. "They're being controlled." Mia gasped. The giant figure turned toward them slowly, deliberately. Then, it opened its mouth. And the cavern shook with a scream that did not belong to the living. A desperate escape. The bridge began to collapse. Cracks spread like veins across the stone as the entire underground city trembled. Cole grabbed Daniel, shoving him forward. "We need to get to the other side, now." The undead swarmed the edges of the cavern, crawling down like spiders, their hollow eyes locked onto the intruders. Samantha's camera flickered as she ran. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "We aren't supposed to be here," she whispered. A chunk of the bridge collapsed beneath Daniel's feet. He screamed, arms flailing, until Ethan grabbed him, hauling him to safety. Behind them, the ancient figure took a step forward. And then, a deep, rumbling voice filled their heads. It wasn't words. It was a presence, pressing into their minds. Something buried. Something old. Something that had just awakened. The group stumbled through an archway, barely making it to solid ground before the bridge crumbled entirely. They turned. The undead stood on the other side, watching them. And the giant figure slowly lowered its gaze, as if letting them go. For now. The truth is buried. The tunnel ahead narrowed, leading back up toward the surface. The group staggered forward, barely able to breathe. They had escaped, for now. But Ethan knew the truth. Black Hollow wasn't just a ghost town. It was a tomb. And something deep beneath the earth had just woken up. They needed to get out. Before it decided to follow. The group emerged from the tunnel, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. Fresh air filled their lungs, but it did nothing to erase the horror of what they had just witnessed. Daniel collapsed onto the dirt, his face pale. "Tell me that didn't just happen." Cole looked back at the entrance, his jaw clenched. "It happened. And we're still alive." Mia turned to Ethan. That thing wasn't just a zombie. It was something else." Ethan didn't answer right away. He was still trying to process it himself. The massive, rotting figure, the way it controlled the dead, the ancient city buried beneath Black Hollow. Something about it all felt wrong. Samantha checked her camera. Her hands were shaking. The pictures were still there. Proof that what they saw wasn't just some nightmare. But before she could say anything, a dense fog began to roll in. And with it, a sound. A distant, rhythmic drumming. Mia shivered. Where's that coming from? No one had an answer. And then, they saw the lights. A town that shouldn't exist. The group turned toward Black Hollow. The town had been lifeless and abandoned when they arrived. But now, flickering lamplights lined the streets. The buildings were no longer ruined. Storefronts stood intact, their signs swinging gently in the breeze. And in the distance, figures moved. People. Dozens of them. Walking through the town as if nothing had changed. Daniel's breath hitched. This isn't real. Ethan gripped his pipe, his mind racing. I think we're seeing the past. Samantha snapped another picture. The camera clicked, but the town in the viewfinder looked different. Still abandoned. No people. No lights. Just ruins. Mia exhaled sharply. What the hell is happening? Then, one of the figures turned toward them. From across the fog-covered street, a woman in a tattered dress locked eyes with them. Her expression was blank. Unnatural. And then, she smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too knowing. Ethan's stomach dropped. We need to move. But before they could step back, the figures began to walk toward them. Not running. Just walking. With slow, deliberate steps. The same way the corpses had moved in the underground city. Nowhere is safe. The group backed away, moving toward the tree line. The people of Black Hollow followed. Daniel whispered, "They aren't real, right? They're just echoes." Then, one of the figures stepped onto an old wooden porch. The boards creaked beneath its weight. A cold realization washed over them. These weren't ghosts. They were real. Samantha clutched Ethan's arm. We have to go. Now. They turned and ran toward the trees. The fog thickened, wrapping around them like a living thing. Their footsteps barely made a sound. Behind them, the town of Black Hollow disappeared. The people, the lights, the buildings, all swallowed by the mist. But the feeling of being watched never faded. Mia whispered, "We aren't supposed to leave." Cole shook his head. "I don't care what's supposed to happen. We're getting out of here." And then, up ahead, a figure stepped out of the trees. It was an old man, dressed in ragged clothes. His eyes were sharp, filled with something between fear and knowledge. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped. The group skidded to a stop. Ethan stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" The man's face darkened. "I'm the last one left." His hands trembled as he pointed back toward the fog. "And if you don't leave now, you'll be next." The warning. The old man led them to a crumbling cabin deep in the woods. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and decay. Yellowed papers were scattered across the floor, covered in scribbled notes and sketches. Diagrams of the underground city. Maps of Black Hollow. And drawings of them. The mummified undead. The towering figure. Everything they had seen. Samantha's voice was barely a whisper. "You know what's happening, don't you?" The old man nodded grimly. "This town," he muttered, "was never meant to be found." Mia crossed her arms. "Then why was it built?" The old man sighed. "It wasn't built. It was buried." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Buried?" The man nodded. "A long time ago, something was sealed beneath this land. Something ancient. The people who lived here, they were its servants. They performed rituals, made sacrifices." Cole exhaled. "Then why did they disappear?" The man's face darkened. "They didn't disappear." He pointed at the drawings. "They became something else." Samantha's heart pounded. "The things in the underground city." The man nodded. "The people of Black Hollow never left. They just stopped being human." A heavy silence filled the cabin. Then Daniel asked the one question they all feared the answer to. "Did we wake it up?" The old man's expression turned grim. It was already waking. Then he met Ethan's gaze, his voice like a warning carved in stone. "But now, it knows you're here." The old man's words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Ethan clenched his fists. What do you mean, it knows we're here? The old man exhaled, his hands trembling as he reached for a faded journal on the table. He flipped through the pages, scribbled notes, ancient symbols, and sketches of things that shouldn't exist. Then, he pointed to an entry. The words were shaky, desperate. The sealed one stirs. Its gaze is upon us. We are no longer men, we are its voice, its hands, its hunger. Daniel swallowed hard. Who wrote this? The man's eyes darkened. My grandfather. He was one of them. A cold shiver ran down Samantha's spine. One of what? The old man's voice was barely above a whisper. The hallowed. The hallowed ones. He turned the pages, showing sketches of human-like figures, their bodies withered, faces stretched into nightmarish grins. They weren't just cursed, the old man murmured. They became part of it. Mia's voice was tight. Part of what? The man hesitated, then whispered a name. The sealed one. Cole scoffed. You're telling me this thing turned people into those things? The creatures we saw underground? The old man nodded. They gave up their humanity to serve it. And when the town was abandoned, they remained, watching, waiting. Samantha exhaled shakily. And now that we've seen them? The old man's gaze darkened. Now, they will come for you. They are coming. A gust of wind rattled the cabin walls. The fire in the old man's lantern flickered violently. Then, a distant sound. A slow, rhythmic tapping. Like fingernails against wood. The old man froze. Ethan whispered, What is that? The man's voice was tight. They know you're here. Cole grabbed his gun, shifting toward the door. How many? The tapping grew louder. More of them. Then, a whispering voice slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls. A voice that should not exist. Come back to us. Daniel backed away from the door. That's not real. That's not real. Samantha snapped a picture. The flash illuminated the window. And outside, something grinned at them. The attack. The door exploded inward. A hollowed one lunged inside, skin stretched too tight over its skull, eyes sunken in black. Its mouth gaped unnaturally wide, revealing jagged, inhuman teeth. Ethan swung his pipe, but the creature barely flinched. Cole fired, bang. The hollowed one staggered but didn't fall. Mia grabbed a burning piece of wood from the fireplace and swung it hard. The creature recoiled. The old man seized the moment. He pulled a small pouch from his coat, tossing a handful of powder into the air. The moment it touched the hollowed one's skin, the creature let out an unearthly shriek. Its flesh sizzled and cracked. It stumbled backward, then disappeared into the night. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Daniel panted. What the hell was that? The old man wiped sweat from his brow. A temporary fix. They'll be back. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What was that powder? The man hesitated, then whispered, salt and blessed ash. It weakens them. Samantha exhaled. So they're afraid of it? No, the old man said. It just reminds them of what they lost. Nowhere left to run. The cabin was no longer safe. The group grabbed supplies, knives, torches, anything useful. The old man handed Ethan a small leather pouch of the powder. Use it wisely. Then, he looked Ethan dead in the eyes. You can't run forever. If you want to live, you have to break the curse. Ethan's chest tightened. How? The old man hesitated. The sealed one is waking. You have to stop it before it fully rises. Cole clenched his jaw. And if we don't? The man's expression turned grim. Then there won't be a world left to escape to. A deep rumbling shook the earth beneath them. The old man paled. It's already begun. Outside, the fog thickened. Shadows moved within it. and in the distance, a deep, echoing voice whispered their names. The sealed one had truly awakened. And it was calling to them. The ground trembled beneath them. A low, unnatural rumbling filled the air, like something deep below was shifting, stretching, waking up. The old man gripped Ethan's arm, his fingers like iron. "We don't have time. If you want to survive, you have to finish this." Ethan swallowed hard. "How?" The man's voice was grave. "The sealed one is waking up. You have to stop it before it fully rises." Daniel's breath came in quick gasps. "And if we fail?" The old man locked eyes with him. "Then Black Hollow won't be the only place consumed. The world will follow." A chilling wind howled outside, carrying with it whispers that weren't entirely human. The hollowed ones were still out there. Waiting. Watching. And something far worse was waking beneath them. A desperate plan. Mia stepped forward. "You said this thing was sealed away. How?" The old man hesitated. "There was a ritual. The first settlers, they weren't here to build a town. They were here to keep it buried. They sealed it, trapped it beneath Black Hollow." Samantha's hands shook as she adjusted her camera. "Then why is it waking up now?" The man sighed, his face full of regret. "Because no one has been here to keep the seal strong." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "So we just redo the ritual?" The old man hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he pulled out an old, tattered book. Its cover was leather-bound, cracked with age. He flipped to a page covered in strange symbols, faded drawings of the underground ruins, and something huge, something monstrous, trapped beneath the earth. "This," he said, "is what kept it locked away. And this is the only way to stop it." Cole grabbed the book. "What do we have to do?" The old man's face darkened. "We need to return to the underground city." A heavy silence filled the cabin. No one wanted to go back down there. But they didn't have a choice. A journey into darkness. Armed with torches, weapons, and the old man's book, the group made their way back toward Black Hollow. The fog had thickened, swirling unnaturally around the buildings. The town looked even worse now, more decayed, more lifeless. It was as if Black Hollow was finally collapsing into the abyss it had been hiding for centuries. As they approached the entrance to the tunnels, a cold wave of dread washed over them. Ethan's grip tightened around his pipe. Last chance to back out. No one moved. Even Daniel, who had been the most terrified, set his jaw and nodded. They descended. The sealed one stirs. The tunnels were worse than before. The air was thicker, heavier. The walls seemed to pulse, as if the earth itself was alive. As they moved deeper, faint whispers echoed around them. Mia shuddered. "It's like it's breathing." Cole scanned the darkness, his gun raised. "Let's just get this done." The old man led them to the same sunken city where they had first seen the hollowed ones. The bridge they had crossed was gone, crumbled into the abyss. But the colossal figure was still there. Still waiting. Its massive, rotting form stood at the heart of the ruins. Its empty eyes were locked onto them. Then, it moved. The ground shook violently as it took a slow step forward. And in that moment, the hollowed ones emerged. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. They crawled from the ruins, climbing from cracks in the earth, slipping from the shadows. They weren't attacking. They were worshipping. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, their hands raised in silent praise toward the massive figure that towered over them. Samantha's breath hitched. "It's waking up." The old man opened the book, flipping frantically through the pages. "We need to start the ritual. Now." The final stand. Ethan grabbed the pouch of blessed ash and began scattering it in a circle. Mia and Samantha helped, drawing symbols on the stone floor just as the old man instructed. Daniel and Cole stood guard, weapons raised. The colossal figure took another step forward. Its mouth began to open, revealing endless darkness. And then, the hollowed ones turned toward them. Ethan's stomach dropped. They know what we're doing. The first hollowed one lunged. Cole fired. A bullet tore through its chest, but it kept coming. Daniel swung his crowbar at another, shattering its jaw, but it barely reacted. Mia grabbed a handful of ash and threw it at one of them. The creature shrieked, stumbling backward, its flesh sizzling. "It works," she shouted. The old man began chanting. His voice was strong, commanding. The words were in a language none of them understood, but the air shifted. The sealed one hesitated. For the first time, it looked uncertain. The hollowed one screeched, rushing forward. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Hold the line." Daniel and Cole fought with everything they had. Samantha and Mia continued the ritual, scattering more ash and salt around the ruins. The massive figure shuddered. The earth trembled violently. And then, it roared. Not in pain. Not in fear. In rage. The ritual was working, but the sealed one wasn't going down without a fight. The old man's voice grew louder. The symbols on the walls began to glow. The hollowed one screamed in agony, collapsing. The sealed one took a final, staggering step forward. Then, its body began to crack. Its rotten flesh split apart, darkness spilling from within. The cavern shook violently. Rocks collapsed from above. The ancient city was crumbling. The sealed one let out one final, deafening roar. And then, it shattered. The collapse. The moment it fell, the hollowed ones let out one final, collective wail. Then, they, too, collapsed into dust. The ground beneath them began to crack. Ethan grabbed the old man. "We need to go, now." The group ran. The underground city collapsed behind them, swallowed by darkness. They barely made it out of the tunnels before the entrance caved in, sealing it forever. As the dust settled, the fog over Black Hollow began to lift. The town was truly dead now. Mia gasped. "Did we do it?" The old man looked toward the ruins, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he nodded. "It's over. Or is it?" As the group caught their breath, Samantha glanced down at her camera. It had been recording the entire time. She clicked through the footage. Then, she froze. The last few seconds of video showed the sealed one collapsing into dust. But just before it shattered, its hollow eyes turned toward the camera. And in the final frame, it smiled. The night was silent. For the first time since they had arrived, there were no whispers in the fog. No hollowed ones lurking in the shadows. No tremors shaking the ground beneath them. The town of Black Hollow was finally dead. Ethan's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. He looked back at the collapsed tunnel. Dust still lingered in the air, but there was no movement, no sound, just endless rubble sealing away whatever was left beneath. Mia rubbed her arms, shivering. "We did it. Right?" The old man hesitated. His gaze lingered on the ruins for a moment too long. Then, finally, he nodded. "Yes." But something in his voice didn't sound convincing. Escape from the forgotten town. Samantha was the first to speak. "We need to go. Now." Cole agreed. Before something else decides to crawl out of this nightmare. The group moved fast. They hurried through the abandoned streets of Black Hollow, past the decayed buildings, past the rusted cars that had never left, past the empty houses that had stood witness to something evil for far too long. But as they walked, Ethan felt something strange. The town felt different now. The fog was lifting. The buildings, though ruined, no longer seemed to be watching them. Even the air felt lighter. Had they truly broken the curse? Or had they simply trapped it somewhere else? As they approached their vehicles, a sudden realization hit them. The road. The way they had come. It wasn't there. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "Where's the highway?" The dirt road they had driven in on was gone. In its place, thick, unbroken forest. As if the road had never existed at all. A town erased. Panic set in fast. Cole stormed forward. No. No, 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 this isn't happening. He pushed through the trees, searching. It was right here. We came this way. Mia spun toward the old man. What's going on? The old man's expression was grim. The town was never meant to be found. Samantha's hands shook as she checked her GPS no signal. Ethan clenched his jaw. What does that mean? The old man took a slow breath. Black Hollow is gone. Daniel stared at him in horror. Then where the hell are we? Silence. No one had an answer. And that's when the wind shifted. A faint, distant whisper curled through the trees. Not words. Not a voice. Just laughter. Low. Hollow. Amused. As if something had been watching them this whole time. And it was still watching. The final omen. Samantha felt sick. She lifted her camera, scanning the area through the lens. And then, she saw it. Far in the distance, past the trees, barely visible through the morning mist. A town. Black Hollow. Standing. Untouched. As if it had never been destroyed at all. She sucked in a breath. Guys. They turned. And they all saw it. The town they had just escaped. The town they had just buried. The town that should not exist anymore. Still there. Still waiting. Mia's voice was a hoarse whisper. How? Cole took a step back. We were just there. It should be. Ethan's heart pounded. Something was very, very wrong. The last revelation. The old man exhaled deeply. He looked at the group with an expression that was almost sorrowful. And finally, he said the words they didn't want to hear. You never left. The air grew colder. The trees swayed, whispering. The town in the distance seemed to stretch toward them, as if reaching for them. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. That's not possible. But deep down, he knew the old man wasn't lying. Something had happened in that underground city. Something had changed. Black Hollow was not just a town anymore. It was alive. And now, so were they. Trapped. Forever. Final shot. Samantha's hands shook as she raised her camera. She took one last picture. The flash went off. And in that single frozen moment, the town smiled back. The end.